And Russia's defense ministry said it had struck a military target on the edge of Kyiv overnight with cruise missiles and promised more strikes against the Ukrainian capital in response to Ukrainian attacks on Russian targets. The ministry said its forces had also taken full control of a steel plant in the besieged port of Mariupol. Now, powerful explosions were heard in Kyiv Friday, which appeared to be among the most significant there since Russian troops pulled back from the area earlier this month in preparation for battles in the south and east. Ukraine claimed the Moskva's damage was a result of one of its missile strikes. Russia's defense ministry spoke only of a fire breaking out and of exploding ammunition. The defense ministry said in its statement that its overnight missile strikes on Kyiv had struck the Vizar factory on the edge of the Ukrainian capital. We'll hear more on the situation.
The area around Kyiv was hit on Friday by some of the most powerful explosions heard since Russian forces withdrew from the area 2 weeks ago. Moscow said it had struck a plant in the Ukrainian capital that made and repaired Ukrainian missiles, including anti-ship missiles. Shattered glass from the repair shop and bits of metal that had flown over from the burning building across the street were seen.
We parked the car, and 2 rockets hit at 1 a.m. I did not realize there were 2 rockets coming in, but when I went out afterwards, I waited indoors for some time, fearing more shelling. We saw the 3rd one coming. It was pretty impressive and made a loud sound. It damaged the car, tore out the tires, hit the windows and walls. People suffered too. The walls fell out.
CCTV footage shows one of the powerful explosions that shook Ukraine's Yashniv in Kyiv region early today. According to the Russian Defense Ministry in a statement, the number and scale of missile strikes on targets in Kyiv will increase in response to any terrorist attacks or acts of sabotage on Russian territory committed by the Kyiv nationalist regime. Meanwhile, Oksana Marchenko, wife of pro-Russian Ukrainian politician Viktor Medvedchuk, who had been detained by Ukraine, says she has asked Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to help free her husband. Marchenko claimed that her husband had likely been tortured in custody based on what she had seen in photographs released by Ukraine's State Security Service. She said she did not know the current whereabouts of her husband. Russia on Wednesday told Ukraine to watch out after Kyiv said that it had arrested Medvedchuk and turned down offer to swap the Ukrainian oligarch with Ukrainian servicemen held by Russia. Moscow warned that those holding him might soon be detained themselves. Drone footage shows workers removing bodies from a mass grave in the Ukrainian city of Bucha. The images show workers in white protective suits digging at the bottom of a large trench and recovering bodies. The discovery of so many dead civilians in Bucha following the withdrawal of Russian forces from the town stirred a global outcry. Kyiv is investigating them as war crimes. Moscow has denied responsibility and accuses Ukraine of trying to smear it.
VOA's correspondent Anna Chernikova joins us now from Kyiv. Anna, thanks for joining us on the program. First, are you safe? Russia says it's hit a plant making anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles outside of Kyiv where you are. What's the situation?
Thank you. This is true. Around 1:30 in the morning, citizens of the city of Kyiv and Kyiv region have heard 3 blasts. I've heard that 3 blasts as well, very precisely. So according to the information that we have at the moment, there were 3 missiles. And it was a targeted attack on the plant in the Kyiv region. 2 missiles were destroyed by and shot down by the air protection, and 1 missile reached, according to what we have known for the moment, have reached the plant partly. So part of the plant is damaged. It's not destroyed, but it's damaged. Reportedly, this is exactly the plant that produced the Neptune missiles, which hit a warship which sunk yesterday. So what it looks like a kind of a revenge, because of course Russia is insulted a lot with the loss of their main warship. So apparently this was a kind of a revenge for the ship.
If you're saying it's a revenge, and then probably that also means that this attack has just happened and it won't reoccur again, and there won't be bombardments in Kiev. But do you think that, that the attacks will stop and, for them to concentrate on the east like they've said, or perhaps this is just a lot more to come from Russia's troops?
Officials, and of course we also understand that it's not only about the warship, it's about a lot of things which are happening now in Ukraine on the battlefield. Ukraine is quite successful at the moment. Ukrainian soldiers are doing a great job, and Russia is losing a lot of troops, losing a lot of ammunition, and so on and so forth. So what we hear from the Russian officials recently, that they're trying to accuse Ukraine on the terroristic attacks in the border with Ukraine regions in Russia. They accuse Ukraine of bombardment of the civilian areas, which is not true. And Ukrainian government, Ukrainian officials, they told this already in advance, so they knew that Russia will try to accuse Ukraine. So what we can see is a sabotage, and it reminds a lot what happened in Chechnya years ago. So what we hear from Russia is that they will kind of respond to these attacks by Ukraine and hit Kiev.
What about?
We understand that this could happen.
What about President Zelensky? How is he reacting to this renewed attack by Russia in Kiev?
We don't have official reaction on the particular plant attack for the moment. I think it will come in his evening speech, which is everyday speech that he. But again, Ukrainian government and president in particular, they knew that this might happen, and citizens of Kiev as well. They knew that this could be the case. To be honest, this attack was kind of predicted. So, of course, no one knew exactly what going to happen, but it was kind of a predicted action from Russia. So I think this is nothing more yet to add.
All right, let's talk about the Mariupol and all that's happening. We hear that Ukrainian officials are accusing occupiers there of exhuming bodies to hide evidence of crimes. What are you hearing about that? And we also know people appear to be returning. I hope this blast also outside of Kiev didn't affect them.
There is information from Ukrainian intelligence service, from the civilians who are now located in Mariupol and witnessing this, and also from the military, from Ukrainian military who is protecting Mariupol. There is information that mobile crematoriums are used for these particular cases. Unfortunately, it looks like Russian military are trying to hide what they've done so far, and the number of civilians who have already died. I think that this might be kind of a lessons they learned from Bucha and Kiev region cities. So apparently they are trying to reduce the number of civilians who lost their lives in Mariupol. Again, it's not to get any footages on that or to get official statement because Mariupol is under the blockade. But again, Ukrainian military, Ukrainian intelligence service and civilians are reporting on that. If we talk about Kyiv and Kyiv is coming back to life, I should say that a lot of people are coming back. This is true. There are traffic jams already in the city, so business is starting to work again. Kyiv, everyone understands that there are a lot of risks. Everyone understands that there are risks of attacks, and during the day there are a lot of sirens and air sirens in the city. But again, there is no completely safe place in Ukraine right now, and Kyiv is one of the places where it's quite safe and it's quite stable. People are quite positive about that. So this is what.
And Anna, about the humanitarian corridors, are they still open in the parts around Ukraine at the moment?
But most of the days during this week, I think that only 2 days, none of the corridors were working, but the rest days, there were 9 corridors working. So the one from Mariupol never worked for the past months already. Civilians just able to get out time to time with their private transport, which is very risky, but still, this is the only way. There are corridors working to evacuate people from the eastern parts of Ukraine, some villages in the Donetsk region and Kharkiv region. Not every part, but some parts of the country have been already evacuated almost completely. So this, unfortunately, if we come back to Mariupol, this is exception.
Also, many fear that Ukrainian forces, in fact, this was an intelligence agent in the US who said that Ukrainian forces will face a huge challenge in the east of the country. And then we, of course, know on the other hand that President Zelensky is again asking the West for more weapons. Do you think he will get them? And do you think that Ukraine would succeed in securing the east?
In the Donbas, in the east, would be one of the most difficult battles, and Ukraine is getting ready to this. Everyone understands that this would be very hard for civilians, very hard for the soldiers. But again, this battle would decide a lot in this war. And this is true that our Ukraine and President of Ukraine need ammunition a lot and need different type of ammunition as well. So what we know for now that it was discussed and it was agreed that Ukraine will get additional weapons for attack, so not only for defense. And what is important that was under confirmation as well that Ukraine will get middle range weapons for attack, which will allow some longer distance operations to be done. So hopefully this would be not a lot of official information on that. I think it's a kind of secret things to talk about. So we just know that the negotiation is going on, and there were certain agreements on that as well with international partners.
And finally, I'd like to get your thoughts on perhaps what Ukrainians are also thinking with neighboring countries like Sweden and Finland, thinking about hastening the NATO alliance, joining NATO at this time.
For these countries, it's quite a smart step because, of course, as we can see, with situations that happen in Ukraine with this war, Ukraine was always in the middle between NATO and Russia, and despite the neutral status of Ukraine, Ukraine wanted to join, Ukraine wanted to cooperate, but it was never discussed on the level that, okay, Ukraine is joining NATO. It was not. It was never put this way. So we can see that probably if Ukraine would be a member of NATO, this war would never happen. So I think that for Finland, especially as it shares quite a long border with Russia, it's quite a smart step, and it could be good for their safety. Sweden. Similarly, Russia has its representation in Kaliningrad, which is in the Baltic area, and of course, there are also certain threats, especially if we listen to the recent to what Russian officials said recently about the region.
Thanks, Anne, and continue to stay safe. VOA correspondent Anna Chernikova joining us from Kyiv in Ukraine. Thanks again. Meanwhile, explosions rumbled and smoke rose this week from a steelmaking district in the besieged Mariupol, where dwindling Ukrainian forces are holed up as Russia tries to take full control of the biggest city yet. The Azovstal Iron and Steel Works, one of Europe's biggest metallurgical plants, has become an aptly apocalyptic redoubt for Ukrainian forces who are outgunned, outnumbered, surrounded 7 weeks into Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The east of the southern ports devastated by weeks of shelling. The plant lies in an industrial area that looks out to the Sea of Azov and covers more than 11 square kilometers, containing myriad buildings, blast furnaces and rail tracks. Now, Ukraine has said it is checking on verified information that Russia may have used chemical weapons in Mariupol. Russia-backed separatists have denied using chemical weapons. And the U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said that the expansion of NATO would only promote stability in Europe. According to him, we would not be concerned that the expansion of a defensive alliance would do anything other than promote stability on the European continent, he said during a news briefing. He was responding to a question of whether the United States would be concerned that Russia could escalate the confrontation over Ukraine if Sweden and Finland joined the NATO alliance. Also, the Kremlin on Thursday said it will consider a range of measures to bolster Russia's security if Finland or Sweden joined the group.
We would not be concerned that the expansion of a defensive alliance would do anything other than promote stability on the European continent. Now, of course, any aspirant countries would have to meet the criteria that's spelled out in NATO's charter, would have to receive consent from the alliance itself. But again, NATO is a defensive alliance that is there to defend and to fortify, and NATO would not be a threat to anyone who is not attacking NATO. So Putin is facing a strategic defeat on the military front, on the economic front, as we've just talked about. Politically, President Putin is a pariah. His country is isolated. Diplomatically, you can measure that in terms of the votes we've seen at the UN, of the condemnation that is raining down on Russia from all corners of the globe. The Russian Federation knows where we stand in terms of our commitment to Article 5, the sacrosanct commitment we have that an attack on one is an attack on all. But when it comes to the ICC, we know that the ICC is one potential venue for accountability. We have cooperated with the ICC in the past. I believe
Meanwhile, Ukrainian volunteers distributed food to locals living in Severodonetsk, a town in eastern Ukraine close to the front line, as shelling was heard in the distance. Severodonetsk has been under Russian attack since Moscow launched its assault Ukraine on February 24. The town lies at the northernmost end of Ukraine's several hundred kilometers line of contact, the ceasefire line that Ukraine forces have held against Russian-backed separatists in Donbass since 2020. 12 Ukrainian forces on Thursday, and vehicles were seen in the town's deserted streets around 12 kilometers away from the front line. Bodies wrapped in blankets, sheets were laying down on the floor of the local hospital's morgue. The head of the hospital said they have enough medicines to treat patients, but face shortages for those who are hiding in shelters and basements. Russia probably plans to deploy tens of thousands of soldiers east of Ukraine as it shifts its focus to the country's south and east. U.S. President Joe Biden's national security advisor said this. Also, President Putin says that its invasion is Europe's bloodiest since World War II. Of course, Russia calls it a special military operation aimed at protecting civilians.
I stay here because it's my home, and we help people delivering food, chemistry, and our town just destroying. Boy, it's not good.
Now, Elon Musk is no longer hosting a question and answer session with Twitter Incorporated employees this week, since he isn't taking a board seat at the social media company. The world's wealthiest person was scheduled to join Twitter chief executive Parag Agrawal for an Ask Me Anything meeting with Twitter staff after the company announced last week that Musk had acquired a stake of more than 9% and would join the board. Now, this simple question sparked a lot of discussions online, with many people wondering if Musk is right about Twitter's decline. After all, Twitter has been struggling to grow its user base and engagement levels in recent years, and this according to some analysts. Now, the Tesla CEO sent an offer letter to the company Wednesday night, and according to the filing, quote, I invested in Twitter as I believe in its potential to be the platform for free speech around the globe. And I believe free speech is a societal imperative for a functioning democracy, he said in a letter he sent to Twitter. He continues that, however, since making my investment, I now realize the company will neither thrive nor serve the societal imperative in its current form. He says Twitter needs to be transformed as a private company. Well, the letter was addressed to Brett Taylor, the chair of the Twitter board, not CEO Parag Agrawal, who assumed that title last fall. It concludes Twitter has extraordinary potential, and he says he will unlock it. Well, let's unlock what's in the mind of Elon Musk. Joining us right now is Boye Adegoke. He's the Senior Program Manager, Paradigm Initiative. He joins us virtually. Boye, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right. First, what's your thought? I mean, the significance of this offer for Twitter and for Elon Musk?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting development, and especially when you look at it from the argument of what that means for freedom of expression. Given the role that Twitter as a platform particularly has played recently, as a platform that a lot of people are seen as a go-to platform where they can express themselves. Even for those of us in this part of the world, there is this belief that government has taken over heavily on that platform of expression. It's only social media platforms that allow people to express themselves as freely as possible. And when you list each of those social media platforms, I think Twitter will rank as number one, as that platform that, in my opinion, people have chosen to use, especially for political expression, for expressing concerns about governance issues, etc. And now that the richest man in the world arguably has shown interest in buying that platform, his argument is that he's interested because he believes that the platform is no longer veritable for affording users the right for freedom of expression. While if you look at this on paper, it looks like, yeah, it's trying to do something which is good, but then you also have to then begin to consider the fact that to what extent does the value of even Elon Musk himself align with the free speech that he claims he wants to protect by buying Twitter? I mean, there have been allegations even against him in terms of not, allowing contrary opinion in his private organization. So how can Elon Musk uphold free speech when even in his own private dealings he is not known to be somebody who is open to contrary opinion? So, but that is left to be seen. I think what this tells us again is for us to ask ourselves the question that are we going to continue to depend on private platforms such as the Twitters of this world as the veritable platform for expression? Because what is happening is a conflict between business and public interest. If you look at Twitter has almost become a public interest company in terms of what it does for the people, in terms of ability of people to express themselves. But again, it's still a business, no matter how you look at it, because there's a lot of money involved. Look at the amount of money Elon Musk has even, offered to buy Twitter for. There are people on the board of Twitter who are saying that Twitter is even worth more than that. So you can see that it's a balance between business interests and public interest. And in my own opinion, whether it successfully buys Twitter or not is not really for me the key conversation. The key conversation for me is that whether we are going to continue to rely on such private platforms as the only veritable means for us to be able to really freely express ourselves.
And when you say that, you're also looking at the markets, especially in Africa, and then, of course, Nigeria, and the number of people using that tool. How do you think that we should react in these parts to what appears to be happening to Twitter with this? And that's on the one hand. And the second thing is, do you think that his bid would be accepted at the end of the day?
Okay, I will start from the last question in terms of whether the bid will be accepted or not. I think that's there is a lot of intrigue that has to play out in terms of what will happen in that regard, because it's like I said, it's also business, and when it comes to business, money is very important. The guy has come out to say, I'm buying this for this money. So it's for the current board of directors, the current owners, the shareholders. So one of the arguments Elon Musk is pushing out is that the shareholders also have a stake in this. And he's arguing that if the board of directors don't want him to buy, then let the shareholder vote. Because it's money for everybody, for people who have invested in Twitter, who have shares in Twitter. If somebody is bringing such huge amount of money, it's to their interest, because that's means they're going to make more money. But on the flip side, going to the other question that you asked about, what does this mean for us in this part of the world? Is because I think to a large extent, I think we particularly, there's a poll, which unfortunately I can't quote word for word or verbatim, but there's a poll that has been conducted that shows that in Africa, we use Twitter more for political tweets, for tweets about governance, for tweets about corruption, issues that, that has to do with how we are governed, than even America or the Western world where Twitter was founded. That shows you that for us, Twitter is even more critical to our public life than it is in other parts of the world. So for us, unfortunately, we don't have as much stake in terms of what eventually happens. But the question we then need to ask is, if this happens, what does it mean for us? What it means for us is that the direction that the new owner, that's if the bid is successful, goes, then determines our chances or our ability to use that platform. But I'm also happy with the fact that sometimes every problem is also, an opportunity to innovate. You would recall when Twitter was banned in Nigeria, there was a company from India that was trying to take advantage of that and fill the space. Unfortunately, it couldn't do that because it doesn't have that type of leverage. But I feel that it can go two ways. If Elon Musk takes over Twitter and it makes Twitter a more open and free platform for expression, I'm sure people from this part of the world will be more than happy to embrace Twitter, in that regard. But if Elon Musk owning Twitter means that, for example, Twitter will become a private platform, because there are people who are mooting the idea that this guy is a businessman. If he gets his hand on those platforms, maybe all these tweets that we put out freely, you probably have to start paying for you to make out some tweets, or you have limitation in terms of how many followers you can have. A lot of people are benefiting a lot today because they have many followers that they don't have to pay any money to have. So if this become privatized services, what does that mean? That means that it can't serve the current function it already serves. It means that we have to look elsewhere. I don't know what elsewhere will mean. Will it mean TikTok? Will it mean Snapchat? Will it mean a yet to be known platform, or a platform that already exists that a lot of people are not knowing? But trust me, even if this happens, I'm very, very sure that it's going to be an opportunity to innovate. It's going to be an opportunity for another platform to fill that space. But of course, we can't say anything for certain at the moment until we get to hear the outcome of the bid, whether it gets accepted, whether it becomes successful. But you can tell that Elon Musk is a very determined person. When he wants to do anything, he goes all out to make sure he achieves it. So it's yet to be seen what's going to happen, and when it happens, the steps that Elon Musk takes after that will then determine the direction we are going Is it going to be a one-man business? Is it going to start running things like a one-man show? All of that we tell where the direction that this will go.
And Boye, this was really the argument. I mean, he already owns a multi-billion-dollar company. He's, into space technology. So what really could be his goal at the end of the day? And you've brought the other business angle, if possible, in terms of the privatization. But for a country like Nigeria, and what you've talked about, the poor and how we use it here, do you see anything indigenous floating anytime soon, the nearest future?
That's interesting. But then to first, react to your first comment about he owns a lot of things. Why is he interested in Twitter? You will probably, if you follow Elon Musk, you know that the guy loves Twitter. He loves tweeting. He tweets a lot. He tweets more than even the founder, the current CEO of Twitter. He tweets more than an average person. So I feel that, when you become rich at a particular level, you start pursuing things that are probably your fantasy or your certain obsession. So I guess that's why he wants to buy Twitter. But then let me now come to Nigeria, where you ask the question about what does this mean for Nigeria? Does it mean that we can have a position of a local innovation? Well, there are people who make similar arguments when Twitter was banned in Nigeria that this perhaps was an opportunity for a local, organization to fill the gap. But unfortunately, it may not necessarily work that way. It's not like it's an impossibility, but you also need to look at the climate around here in terms of how willing we are for a platform like this that allow for free expression. I've referred to Twitter ban more than twice during this conversation. That was a development that tells you that we still have a lot of regulatory issues to deal with. Our attitude to innovation is not encouraging because in this part of the world, you almost have to pander to government for you to be able to get anything done. And that gets me worried in terms of our ability to innovate locally. But what I cannot rule out is the possibility of a Nigerian, coming up with an innovation like this. What I can't then guarantee is that has to happen necessarily locally. I mean, the world is a global village. So I don't rule out the possibility of a Nigerian coming up with ideas because I believe in the ingenuity of Nigerians' ability to do this. But they will need a better regulatory environment for it to thrive, because before Twitter thrived in other parts of the world, it first thrived in the US. So we need a space that allows for innovation, that discourage stifling of free voices, that allow for that encourage new ideas for that to thrive. And if that is going to happen, I think Nigeria needs to switch things up in terms of being open to innovation, not clamping down on free expression, not clamping down on young people because you don't understand their ways, you don't understand the things they are doing. I mean, this brings me back to the conversation about cryptocurrency, NFTs, and I mean, a few days ago I was harassed by the police and all of that, and they were checking my phone for just anything to implicate me with. I don't think that kind of environment is conducive for innovation. So that's the problem that I see, because if you look at some of the innovative companies that has emerged out of Nigeria in recent times, and I'm talking about tech companies, it's only a matter of time before they get sold to some interest outside Nigeria. So I believe in Nigeria can do the magic, but I don't believe that the regulatory environment here can really be the space where that will happen. So Nigeria can start something, and perhaps with foreign help, we can fill the gap. But if we want to have the kind of impact that Twitter is having, then we need a little less of government trying to clamp down, trying to control everything. Asking the NBC to regulate everything. It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all.
Boye, we get your point. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time for joining us such short notice. Boye Adegoke, Senior Program Manager at Paradigm Initiative. Many thanks for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you for having me.
We move on to other stories. French President Emmanuel Macron called the pay package of Franco-Italian car maker Stellantis CEO shocking, with excessive executive pay now a hot topic in France's tight-run presidential election, just 9 days ahead of a runoff that will determine who will lead the European Union's second-largest economy for the next 5 years. Opinion polls show Macron is only slightly ahead of Le Pen in a contest that could potentially go either way. The 2021 compensation package for Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares adds up to around 19 million euros, plus a stock package worth some additional 32 million euros and long-term compensation of about 25 million euros. Macron, who has faced opposition against his plan to increase the retirement age in France, also said if re-elected, he plans to increase pensions by 4% to 4.5% to correspond with inflation rates. And Palestinians clashed with Israeli police in Jerusalem and the West Bank on Tuesday as Israel and Hamas cross-border fire entered its 9th day, and a general strikes announced across the Palestinian territories in parts of Israel and Jerusalem. Police say they entered the compound revered by Jews at the Temple Mount and by Muslims as a noble sanctuary to disperse a crowd, throwing rocks towards the prayer site of the Western Wall nearby. An 80-story skyscraper in North Korea's capital completed the past week is the latest in a push by the leader Kim Jong-un to turn Pyongyang into what state media calls a people-first city. Glamorous high-rise apartment buildings now adorn Pyongyang's skyline, and for many outside the country, living in the penthouse might be considered the dream. But what if you had to take the stairs up and down every day? According to defectors from the country, that nightmare is a daily reality. Defector Jung Soo-woo says that people who live in these penthouses are poor rather than rich, and that the water can't be pumped up because of low water pressure. He also said his friend, who lived on the 28th floor of the 40-story building, had never once used a lift in his life because they never worked. Housing is assigned in the socialist state, while the buying and selling of apartments is technically illegal. But historically, few people have ever wanted to live on the highest floors. While the power supply has improved significantly under Kim, North Korea still grapples with shortages and sometimes shoddy infrastructure. Many have turned to individual solar panels during the blackouts, which is only enough to power small electronics. And today, Paris marks the 3rd anniversary of the fire that ravaged its beloved Notre Dame Cathedral. The blaze, which took place April 15, 2019, caused the roof and spire of the Gothic landmark to collapse, although the main bell towers and the outer walls were saved by firefighters, as well as religious relics and priceless artworks. It took 400 firefighters and 14 hours to finally quell the flames. When the fire broke out, maintenance work was underway on the cathedral's spire and scaffolding had been erected. The metal scaffolding poles melted in the fire, part of the reason for the delay, according to officials, and was also the deformed poles had to be disentangled from the cathedral structure. The inferno melted hundreds of tons of lead in the cathedral's spire roof, which contained more than 450 tons of the metal. French President Emmanuel Macron had set a target of 5 years for restoring the cathedral and have it ready for the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. After works were postponed due to the COVID lockdown, securing the structure was finally concluded last year. These works included reinforcing the fire-damaged vaults with giant wooden arc-shaped frames. The state agency leading the restoration said that it was on track to meet President Macron's reopening target date. And carrying wooden crosses, singing hymns, Catholic Christians held a procession in the old city of Jerusalem today, retracing what is traditionally held to be the route that Jesus took to his crucifixion. Worshippers who follow the Western calendar began the Easter festival of Good Friday with the procession through the Via Dolorosa to the Holy Sepulchre Church, where Christians believe Jesus was buried before rising from the dead 3 days later. The Via Dolorosa starts from the Ecce Homo convent and leads to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And along the route, there are the 14 stations of the cross. The first station is where Jesus was believed to have been condemned to death. The last is the tomb where Christians believe he was buried. And Israelis make last-minute preparations for the Jewish holiday of Passover this week, due to begin as the sun sets today amid tight security in the wake of a fresh spate of violence. Tensions were high in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories during the weeks ahead of the Passover festival, which this year coincides with the holy month of Ramadan and Easter, Christian Easter celebrations. 2 Palestinians from the territory and 3 members of Israel's Arab minority have killed 14 people in Israel since late March. The Israeli military have stepped up its raids in the West Bank. At least 25 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since January. Israeli police clashed with mass stone-throwing Palestinians today near Al-Aqsa Mosque in the old city of Jerusalem, when the violence erupted after Friday's Ramadan morning prayers. And working in the American fashion industry does not isolate Nigerian American designers from race and social class segregation, but talent, authenticity and determination makes all of the difference. This is the view of renowned designers Niyi and Ademola Okuboyejo. The renowned designer brothers believe there is more room for Nigerian designers to offer pieces that have a global fashion appeal by tapping into the country's unique cultural heritage and roots.
Growing up in Nigeria, you wake up and you mostly see black people, right? So the idea of race, the concept of race that you experience in America is totally different. You have to be confronted with the idea of you being black and being an other. And so when I came here, I quickly observed that there were these classes that were around within the environment of the United States. And I understood that in order for me to survive, I was 14 years old at the time, that I had to assimilate really quickly. I came here at 14, he was 16 at the time, and we went to live with our uncle. And so it was such a different time. For us, it was, we were still learning about ourselves. We were still trying to understand who we were, right? And now we're dumped in a place where you add the dynamic of race in the context of America, where it's like you're a black person, and within this system, you are an other.
I believe there's more to Nigeria than the color green and white, right? I feel like my culture is very, very, it's super, super colorful. There's so many ways you can dissect into it and peel different forms of inspiration to design something tangible. Like, think about it, like it's no different from Andy Warhol or Ralph Simmons during his run at Calvin Klein, how they used both of their platforms to define what Americana means to them, right? But they used fashion and art as a medium to tell the story of Americana, but in a non-unconventional way. So I feel like I'm doing the same thing, but with a West African point of view.
To catch the full interview with Niyi and Ademola, do watch Diaspora Network Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Over to South Africa, where local NGOs are working hard to assist the numerous victims of the deadliest floods on record in the southern eastern KwaZulu-Natal province. Survivors are said to be in desperate need of basic necessities after losing everything in the floods, which began earlier this week. According to the latest figures, at least 341 people have been killed. Officials say that number could rise as rescue operations are still ongoing. More rain is planned this weekend as well in the same area.
It's been so hard for us, and even water, electricity in some other areas there isn't any water, electricity. As you can see how we suffering to get water. We're coming from Amandletu to fetch water.
I think we shouldn't do one, because a lot of people stay in places where they can't get information of what's happening, and most of them have been flooded already. So I think maybe they could have done something to tell us what's going to happen.
And North Korea celebrated the 110th anniversary of the birth of late founder Kim Il-sung today with fireworks and an evening gala in Pyongyang's main square with thousands of people in colorful traditional dress, singing and dancing. State media aired live footage of the gala in Kim Il-sung Square after sundown Friday, but provided no sign of an anticipated military parade. International monitors had said commercial satellite imagery showed preparations for a military parade in the run-up to the holiday, but there was no confirmation of a parade happening as of Friday evening. And finally, on the world today, love broke all boundaries. And this happened yesterday as a Russian man married a Ukrainian woman in Tijuana, the largest border city connecting Mexico with California, to seek asylum in the United States. More than 10,000 kilometers away from their home countries, Russian Semir Bobrovsky and Ukrainian Darina Shunyk got married at the civil registry offices of the Tijuana City Hall. Before the Russian invasion, the couple lived in Ukraine and managed to leave the country and arrive in Mexico a fortnight ago to apply for refugee status in the U.S. The U.S. authorities only allowed Daria to enter the U.S. as a refugee, as the Russian community has not been allowed to enter the country since the war began. The only Russians allowed to enter the U.S. are those who can prove with a document that they have family there. Due to the restriction, the couple asked the Municipal Directorate of Migrant Services in Tijuana for support to get married. Love breaking boundaries. Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Nwaka. Have a good day.